And we have with us, of course, some of the What's Next team with their backgrounds all the same. So if you have any questions as we go through this, don't hesitate to private message us. So as we get going today, we will use the chat function. So along the bottom of your screen, you should see a little comment box with the word chat underneath it. We love to have your questions and your comments come in as the conversation goes along. Now, if you're someone who loves to just focus and add your questions at the end, don't hesitate. Happy for that as well. But once Christine wraps up, we will take a few minutes just to have discussion, and we'll draw off of those questions that you've noted there, or open up the room for anyone to ask any live questions that you do have. So please feel free to use that as we go through the day today. And so before I get going, I'll just pause for a second. Are there any questions on the logistics before we move into our day? No? Okay, fantastic. So before we get started, I will do a land acknowledgement. It's important for us as a What's Next group to recognize where we are and to recognize the environment that we are within. And so we'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we have gathered today is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat peoples. Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge of Indigenous people, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to meet on this land. Now, as we collect all around the globe, we are all on very different lands. So if we just take a moment to acknowledge where we are gathering from, we are in great gratitude to the day that we are about to have today. So as we get started, I am going to introduce Christine so we can transition into our speaker session. Have I missed any logistics as we go? No, I think we're good. This is me going through my logistics in my mind. So Christine, thank you so very much for joining us today. We're very excited to have this conversation. We understand that you are a seasoned entrepreneur and powerful team builder whose authenticity and passionate engagement create community wherever you focus your attention. Christine is the co-founder and chief experience officer of the Modern Elder Academy, the world's first midlife wisdom school. And I have to say, one of our first inspirations as well, as you guys have grown, we have been right alongside, adoring every step that you are taking. Christine is known and recognized as an igniting force for new ideas. She is passionate about creating experiences that change people's lives, be it in the MEA's classroom, the community, or in the workplace. Christine's uncompromising values-based leadership, deep understanding of human needs, and the ardent activism and stewardship of the land make her an inspirational modern elder. So today I'll hand it over to Christine. She's going to guide us through the next hour. We might do some breakouts, which Sarah will help us with, and just feel free to ping us if you have questions. But Christine, welcome. We're so very excited to be with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. What an introduction. I need to see who wrote that thing. It just sounds like, I was taking notes, igniting force for new ideas. That just sounds like someone who's a real pain in the ass to work with.
Well, hello, everyone. That was not what the intent.
No, and I know, I think it came from our team. But it's funny to listen to you read it. You know, I'm sure I've approved it in the past, but just sounds like a lot. Anyway, I'm thrilled to be with all of you. Thank you so much for having me. And Mebs, your support and What's Next, ongoing support of MEA's journey. Peter, thank you both for being such cheerleaders for what we're doing. So I'm going to start with the why. Actually, I'm going to start with, does everyone have a way to write? Because we're going to have a little journaling section here. So if you don't have pen and paper, if you want to gather something, I do prefer, if it's available to you, the tactile nature of a pen and paper. But if you're taking digital notes, we can completely, and I'm not asking you to take notes for me, there's going to be a journaling piece. So let's start with the why. We created almost 6 years ago what we were calling the Modern Elder Academy. We started on the beach in Baja California, Sur, Mexico. And the impetus was really this idea that midlife is a time that is so incredibly rife with transitions. And as generally as a society, and I can't speak for everyone, of course, but in the society that I was raised in, there's not a lot of acknowledgement around how much change and transition there is during this time. So we know, at the turn of the century, adolescence did not exist. There was not a name for adolescence. Children were children, and then they were working in factories. And we didn't acknowledge that there was this period of time where there was such intense change, both physiological change, physical change, emotional change. So we developed as a society tools and schools to support this time of transition. Now we all shorthand. Oh, it's just a teenager. Oh, they're sleepy. We know that there's hormonal change. We know that they're going through this entire bath of chemicals. And we acknowledge that as a society. We create structures to support it. We manage our expectations around those adolescents coming from a place of knowing, coming from a place of naming. If we look at all of the change that happens in adolescence, and then we fast forward into middle age, can we just popcorn? What are some of the changes that we go through in middle age? And I think we're a small enough group if you want to just unmute, if you're muted, and we can just popcorn, just shout it out. Midlife changes, anybody?
Children leave home.
Children leave home, empty nest, absolutely. What else is out there?
Becoming a grandparent.
Grandparents, so familial changes, status change. Anybody else?
Last chance to make big changes.
Say that again, please.
Last chance to make really big changes.
Okay. We're going to dig back into that.
Okay.
Thank you. That's juicy.
Career
The loss of loved ones.
Career changes, loss of loved ones.
Body
Right.
changes.
Yeah, there are
Body
physical
changes.
changes.
I felt self-conscious when I turned on this call because I had my fan on, and every time that I run my fan, people say, "Are you someplace hot?" And I'm like, I am 54 years old. I am always someplace hot.
You bring it with you.
Just comes with me. Unless I'm on the ski hill and it's freezing and I can never manage to turn on a hot flash on demand. I would love to figure that out, but I have not.
You could figure that out. You could make a fortune.
I would. Those cold powder days. Yeah, so it is a time absolutely rife with transitions. And yet, generally speaking, as a society, we have not acknowledged the way that we have acknowledged that adolescence is a time filled with both physical, emotional, and situational change, that in midlife, we are in situational, emotional, and physical change for years. So our intent was to create both a school and the tools to help shepherd more conversation around this. And it's been working. It's really interesting. From the very first cohort that we gathered together in Baja, both the depth of the community and the richness of the conversation kind of stunned us. And what we learned very early on was this idea that we could be a crucible for midlife wisdom, not something that we teach. Wisdom is not something, we don't believe that wisdom is something that is taught, but wisdom is something that is shared. So we've created some series. Of course, we have a point of view, but our goal is always to create a crucible and kind of drop conversation seeds in and see what we can harvest from the group. Because if you look around on this screen right now, the collection of experience and sophistication that we bring together when we come together with humans who have a little bit of experience can be quite stunning. So creating the space for us to share what we know with each other, powerful. It's really powerful. What I'd like to do, is there any questions on that? That's a really brief origin story of MEA, and I've got 6 years of findings and hard knocks that we've had in between, but that's probably enough unless there's specific questions. Okay. I'd like to go into just maybe like a 3-minute micro journal. And if we could, I'll set a timer. And in that time, I want you to really think about what are the transitions that you are currently in. Really dig into what transitions are you currently in? And if you want to turn off a screen, why don't we all turn off cameras for 3 minutes, and we'll call you back in 3 minutes. Keep your pen moving. if you feel like you've run out of ideas, just let the pen glide across the paper and keep going, thinking about transitions. I'm starting a clock now. And please come back. Turn your screen back on. Anyone surprised by how many transitions you're actively actually in at this moment? Not surprised. Chris, you are well aware of your transitions. Chris Kobus?
Yeah, they've been taking place over the last 7 years.
Yeah.
Lots of them.
It is. We are filled with these transitions in midlife. So there's a reason that we do at MEA, we use microjournaling a lot, both for the compressed timeline, which helps us access different information, but also we use it before we go to breakout groups and to dyads, because we've learned from neuroscience that if you don't take the time to set your own thoughts before you get into a conversation, there's often a dominant speaker that can lead us. So now that we've had some time to think about our own transitions, I'd like to send us into breakout groups of, if we're an even number, we can go into dyads, and we'll just let's spend 6 minutes, try to be even with the time, talking to each other about the transitions that you are currently in. Before I send you into dyads, though, I do want to issue one invitation, and we're fast forwarding a little bit here. But at MEA, we talk about the different vaults that we live in. And there's 3 vaults, although some of our cohorts have challenged us that maybe there's more. So the first vault is really kind of just our facts and figures. I'm Christine, I'm 54 years old. The things that you might read on a resume is vault 1. Vault 2 takes us into kind of maybe our more practiced stories. It's kind of the cocktail talk. It's a little bit deeper than the facts, but it's, kind of what we use to say who we are to each other. It's our shtick, maybe a little bit. And then the third vault is really an invitation to to be in that place of what is real for you, what is of essence right now. And this is where we find real, deep, meaningful connection. And so we are fast forwarding this because we are come together online. We haven't met each other before, and we are spread all over the globe. But I will give you the invitation as we go into these breakout groups to see if you can test into that third vault, into having a conversation about your transitions, possibly with a stranger, but from a place of real authenticity and trust. And let's see how that goes. So let's spend 6 minutes in breakout groups talking about your transitions, try to make time for each other. And we'll bring you back in at the end of 6 minutes, talking about what transitions you are in right now. And when we come back, we're going to do a lot of naming about the parts of the transition, but let's just name these transitions first. Can we go to breakouts, please?
Are we back? Oh, yeah.
All right. Welcome back. I hope that was a juicy conversation for everyone. Anyone want to popcorn transitions that either you uncovered during your journal or were shared? Let's hear again. We're small enough to just popcorn. See if there's a tonal difference after spending some time thinking about it.
Well, I'll leap in. I was talking with Mary Pat Tillman and Christine, and one of the things she said just jumped out at me was this. She's a retired GP and so forth, and so she said 2 things that were really interesting from her perspective. And I don't want to put words in her mouth, but here I am. One was the freedom of learning. And I love that phrase, right? It's you learn not to dabble, not to be a dilettante, but you actually aren't, because it's tied in with the she said something that also stuck with me. In this phase, you can now say goodbye to the guilt of leaving a profession that everyone wants you to stay in, right? Because there's a shortage of doctors. And so when you say goodbye to the guilt, it gives you the freedom to learn. I love that. We had and from my perspective here in my home, the couple of things we brought up in this phase were this idea of this awareness of time that you had, which you maybe didn't have when you were a kid. And the other is being, the change in self-worth and being brave enough to try new things. So that's a kind of a snapshot of the conversation.
Gorgeous. I love that. I wrote down the freedom of learning, like just learning for the joy of it.
Yeah.
We often say that we were trained that it was a kind of a 3-stage life where we would learn, earn, and retire, right? And that now with these extra 30 years of longevity that we've found as a human species over the last century, that 3-stage life doesn't really work, the earn, learn, retire. And what we're learning, what I'm learning from my younger coworkers all the time is they're not interested at all in an earn, learn, and retire. They want a rich and fulfilling life the whole way through. I'm really inspired by that. What else did we hear about? Some transitions that we might be in. Jamie, I think that you had your hand up.
Hi there, Christine. So I would say that so the event was losing my parents or loss of my parents in 2022 and 2023. And so I think that what's come out of it is sort of this I would say awareness of mortality, and that, time is not infinite, time is finite. And so what I've been thinking about is gratitude, gratitude for obviously my parents, gratitude for friends, gratitude for my health and food and roof over my head, that type of thing. I'm also very intentional now. I want to, do things that are really meaningful to me because I know time is finite. So really, not wasting time and just doing things that are meaningful to me. So I would say awareness of mortality, and with that comes, I think, a degree of wisdom. Anyway, and feeling of gratitude and knowing that to be very intentional. I guess that's what I would say.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm so sorry about your parents.
Thank you.
Anyone else? You take one more.
And we are more alike than we're different with all of these things.
We are more alike than we are different. So there's a study that's been done, absolutely massive global study. So, very few things apply to us, I find, as a species, but this one seems like it was almost species wide. The U curve of happiness. And it showed that as a species, the bottom of the U curve of happiness is 47. We are the least happy at 47. And in our 50s, we are happier than we are in our 40s. Again, this is as a species. In our 60s, we are happier than we are in our 50s. 70s, happier than we are in our 60s. And then in our 80s, it can go a little wobbly in our 80s, depending on health outcomes, but we're often happier in our 80s than we are in our 70s. I think Russian women were the outlier on this, but that is not a story that we often hear through the media. The fact that as a species, we grow happier as we age in a youth-obsessed culture. We just don't hear that very much. At least I didn't. So here we are. We've got 30 extra years of life. We know that we're kind of in an unnamed period. We know very clearly that adolescence marks a time of transition. We get to this middlescence. We don't have tools. We don't have schools. We don't have names. But here we are in this time, rich, rich, rich with transitions. Everything from all the things we've named here. Time affluence is new for many people. That comes from career change, family change, physical change. We have loss. We have health, maybe a diagnosis for the first time. These are all very, very common. And they range from kind of these smaller transitions through to life quakes. Bruce Feiler is probably the best thinker on this in the whole world. So if you're really interested in transitions, I think that Meb's shared our Anatomy of a Transition ebook with everyone, but Bruce Feiler has certainly inspired us and does a great job of a deep dive on this. Another guest faculty that we work with is Dr. Barbara Waxman, and she has named this period in life middlescence. The power of naming is so important. So both naming the transitions, naming this period of our life, and then to make us more fluent in all these transitions, we wrote this ebook, The Anatomy of a Transition, again, back to the power of naming. So I think everyone received this. Okay, you're going to share. Mebs just said in the chat, you'll be getting this ebook after. You'll see in the ebook, this is called the design squiggle. And it actually comes out of great design minds. Is anyone familiar with the design squiggle? Do you want to talk to us, Hope, about what the design squiggle represents? Because it's so cool.
I'm having trouble accessing what it means and my reference to it. Did that squiggle not come out of that didn't come out of one of the courses, the Anatomy of Transition, did it? I thought
we definitely used it, but it
okay.
wasn't. The design squiggle comes out of design thinking work.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, go ahead.
Meant to represent the process of moving through kind of the design as a problem that we solve. And so we adapted it for Anatomy of a Transition. You'll be getting our whole like 25-page ebook with just gorgeous thinking around this.
Yeah,
but
can I just add to that? Just that it's not we often think about problem solving as a linear process. And what that shows is that it's not a linear process, and that solutions actually don't come in a linear fashion. They come in kind of a more ad hoc kind of way. And that's also linked to creativity. So that's what I remember about that.
Beautiful, Hope. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So we wrote this book because we realized, again, we're in this stage, we're rife with transitions. How do we get better at it? If we can build a language and competency around transitions, if we can be more fluent and graceful in transitions, we could be more fluent and graceful throughout midlife and beyond. And so we took upon the mission of diagnosing a transition. And we found that there are really distinguishable parts in any transition. The most noticeable is that a transition begins with an ending. Think about that. A transition begins with an ending, whether it's the ending of a job, it's the death of a friend or a partner or a parent or a pet or a diagnosis. There is a distinct ending to what was normal in that moment and moving into the new. So if we think about transitions in three parts, part one is really the end. Part two is the messy middle. Does that really ring true to everyone when you think about a transition, the messy middle? And then the new beginnings is the third part. And then we further dove into each one of these parts and felt that there's naming available within these parts as well. So within the end, which is the beginning, you start with the external kick or the internal shift. So either this is something that happens to you or some change that you know you need to make. That is stage or phase one of the first stage of the ending. We often move into denial from there. This isn't happening. I'm going to keep everything the same. Everything's fine. I'm not talking about it. And then often that next step is the emotional bath, where we kind of accept that this is happening and we're going through all the emotions. We at MEA feel that that compromises that first stage, that end stage of a transition. So the transition begins with an ending. External kick or internal shift, move into denial, and then into the emotional bath. If we get through all three of those, we move into the second stage of the transition, which is the messy middle. And this, for me, is where I feel like we can really develop the most fluency around this. So number one, the first phase of the second stage, and you'll get this in the book, we call incompetence. It is where we are competent. It is what we know. And it is so easy as we begin to move through a transition to want to come back to what is familiar, to what is safe. This is what I know how to do. This is the relationship I've always been in. This is how I've always acted. So we get stuck in our competence. It's a little bit of a trap. It's totally understandable, but that's going to keep you in the messy middle. The longer you return to what is safe, the longer you are in the messy middle. From there, if you can get through and maybe embrace a little bit of more vulnerability and unknowing, we get into what we call the soup. You're in the soup. It's a lot going on. We're not quite sure what's happening. We're not returning to what we know. It feels real messy. That's the soup. And then we begin in this messy middle to tease out the threads. What's going to lead us into our next? What are we interested in? Where are we going? Right? This is the beginning to find those threads of interest, of next, of curiosity. At this point, we're not going back to what we know. We're not wallowing. We're beginning to develop that for future interest. From there, if we can tease these threads long enough with a curiosity and our wisdom, and at MEA, we say that wisdom is metabolized experience that leads to distilled compassion, right? If we look at the metaphor of the caterpillar into the butterfly, this chrysalis time, this very soupy time, where emerges an entirely new life. As humans, we are not guaranteed a butterfly stage. That metabolism is on us, right? That's the metabolized experience. I'm sure we all know people who have grown older but not grown wiser. So we think about how do we use that metabolized experience, especially when we're moving through these transitions into becoming. From becoming on, we're in that third stage of the transition, the new beginning. So we're becoming, and then we're taking flight, right? It becomes more easy, becomes more natural. We develop new competencies. And then from taking flight, we find flow. And flow really, one of my favorite concepts, especially as an athlete. And we pulled this work. If you're interested in the idea of flow, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is a great thinker, and we'll reference him in that ebook that you'll also get. The idea of flow is that we're kind of in that perfect space between challenge and competence. And if you think about this as a chart, right, you're at an x-axis and a y-axis. I hate using slides, so I'm sorry, you have to just follow my hands. You get two axes. And one is challenge and one is competence. If you just go right up the middle of that, where things are not too easy, when they are too easy, we're in boredom, when you don't have enough challenge and too much competency. And that can be boring, but it can also be comfortable. And that's one of the traps that we have to watch for, right? That boring, comfortable space. On the other hand, when there's too much challenge and we don't have the competency, we're in that panic zone. But in that sweet spot in the middle is flow. It's where there's enough challenge to keep us interested. We're growing. One of our favorite tools that we use is growth mindset. And it really serves us in midlife and beyond. If you think about, you've had I'm going to broad strokes here right now to this group, but it's easy to imagine that you all have been quite successful and you've all been rewarded for knowing and being prepared throughout your lives. Is that true? I bet it's true. It is easy. And this is why I love that the freedom of learning came back up, because that really taps into this idea of growth mindset. The idea that we can continue to learn, that we don't, if there's something that we don't know, it's more that we just don't know it yet. That we give ourselves the freedom to fail, that we don't, I actually lead a workshop with a man who is considered the father of modern skateboarding. His name is Stacy Peralta. He moved from being a pro skateboarder in the 70s into founding the largest skateboard company in the world. And at the top of it, making millions of dollars, he decided he wanted to be a filmmaker. So he exited skateboard industry and failed for 10 years trying to break into TV and movie and film. I mean, really, really struggled. And then he created a film it was actually a documentary about the early days of skateboarding. Someone convinced him to submit it to Sundance, the film festival. He said he was horrified. He was sure that no one was going to come. He showed it was accepted, which surprised him. He arrived to Sundance still feeling like that feeling of you're throwing a dinner party and no one's going to come. And he was checking in. And as he was checking in, they said, oh, you're with Dogtown and Z-Boys? Every one of your screenings is sold out. And that was kind of his first indication that something interesting might be happening here. And he has, yes, thank you. Don't fall in love with your identity or it will hold you hostage. This is Stacy, who's one of my favorite co-facilitators. Stacy's premise, now he's a wildly successful filmmaker at this point, in a sought after director and producer. His entire premise is always stay in the kook phase. So this comes out of skateboarding and surfing, where you're either good and competent or you're a kook, right? And it's like such a derision to be a kook. And Stacy has embraced it. He will go out and learn a new sport. He will try new surfboards. He is not tied to his dignity in any way. And it is such a living example for me of growth mindset. So we use this growth mindset to get ourselves into flow state. It is one way that we can help find a step function through flow state. Because if we think of that, kind of that chart, again, X and Y axis with competence and challenge, for most of us, we don't just go straight up that chart. You don't just, we need the step function to build the competence. And then we become more comfortable. And then we build competence and we become more comfortable, right? It is a step function. And we believe that a growth mindset really helps us to accelerate that step function through. So these are the steps. It starts with an ending. We get into the messy middle where we often get stuck and caught because it's what we know. And then when we are able to tease out those new threads and new beginnings, embrace growth mindset, let ourselves embrace the new and exciting, find that there's still the temptation to run back. This is what I know, we got to stay. Find flow moving forward. When we get good at transitions, when we get good at being able to name where we are in a transition, it is such an incredible tool in midlife. Any questions? All right, I'm going to give you one of my very favorite hacks in transitions, and then we'll go to Q&A. So another one of my co-faculty is Dacher Keltner, who's the founder of the Greater Good Science Center in Berkeley and the world's foremost scholar in the human emotion of awe, which makes me angry that I never thought that that was a career path. Can you imagine learning at 17 that you could be the scholar in awe? I didn't know. I love this. In times of uncertainty, everything is possible. So Dacher's work around awe really moves us out of a space of feeling kind of singular and individual and isolated, and into a much more expansive state. And he wrote, his last book is called Awe, and there are 8 different pathways that he has identified that are easy ways to move yourself into this awe state. And awe is the human emotion of the way we experience the vast and unexplainable. And so of those 8 pathways, there's 3 for me that are just my very favorite, and that I find when I am stuck in transition, reaching into awe state really helps to accelerate through. And so number 3 of the 8 pathways is nature. So just putting yourself in nature can help you reach that connection that we find through awe. Another is collective effervescence. This is from Emil Durkheim's work, the idea that we kind of dissolve individually. So moving together, if you can find a dance class, anything that has us moving in unison where we begin to co-regulate, moves us into awe state. And the number one way, and this was such a surprise, and again, this was a massive study, the number one way that we move into awe as human beings is what he calls moral beauty. And it is witnessing acts of courage, kindness, or generosity. So if you can find you can find a way to experience moral beauty It will take you out of yourself into the vast mystery of being human, help us feel more connected to each other. And from that expansive state, I often find that it is a tool to help move me through transitions. I highly recommend this book. That's all I have to say today. I hope that there's something valuable for you in that, and I'm happy to do a Q&A.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Christine. We'll move into some Q&A here. Any questions jumping out from people? You can just unmute yourself and ask. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you for that, Christine. That was so much fun and like little nuggets. The popcorn continues. That was really great. I was curious if you could tell me more about how you said, if I get this wrong, please help me out. Something about being aware of what state, what phase, what part of the phases you're in helps with the journey overall. Is that I'm guessing self-awareness, that's what that's speaking to me, but I'd love to understand that a little bit better.
Perfect.
Please.
So if we think about it if we think about a transition, we break it down into the anatomy. There's 3 stages and there's phases within each of those stages. If you name the transition that you're currently in, break out one, and then look at it across this chart and understand where in that chart you are currently sitting. Like for me, it's always incompetence. I'm always coming back to what I know. That's what keeps me from moving forward, right? It's going to be different for everyone. But when you identify where you are in that, exactly sitting in the anatomy of that transition, then you can begin to think about moving into the next. So it's really just the power of naming and knowing, and then you can make a plan. Is that helpful?
It's like I'm imagining I'm seeing a map.
Yeah.
You are here.
Exactly.
Drop a pin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great question.
So maybe I could jump in on that too, because I think part of what happens for me is that you resist it rather than naming, oh, this is to be expected, like I'm here now. And I guess then if you have any comments on the strategies that you use when you're in that space, when you say that you're in that, you recognize it as incompetence. I'm feeling incompetent, or I am incompetent, and it's okay to be incompetent. What else can you nudge yourself with?
Yeah, I really find that the tools that move me through transitions well are growth mindset, accessing an awe state, but knowing where I am in the transition really is so powerful. And sometimes it's as much as like, this is where I am in the transition, and that's fine. But this is where I am. It's as simple as dropping a pin. This is where I am right now. And that knowing is power as well.
Thank you.
We produce week-long workshops around this, and we spend the entire 5 days. So we've had 50,000 people come through MEA over the last 6 years, and we've refined our curriculum over those 5 years. And what we found is that really this midlife work comes down to three different pillars. And one is navigating transitions. We get really good at navigating transitions. We can get really good at midlife. The second thing that people are really interested in our stage is generally purpose. Very curious about purpose. And then our third pillar is about owning our wisdom and how can we use that to reflect it back and to serve the world. So we've got lots of techniques in a workshop if you'd like to come. But again, my favorite, if I were to give you the shortcut, is really the all work and growth mindset. I find are both accelerants through. If it's a thick,
incredible. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Herbert, did you want to go next?
Yeah, I could see a big difference in 2 types of transitions. The one is which is imposed or forced on you. Let's say you are fired and you didn't want to be fired, or it's a transition that you initiated yourself. if you initiate a transition yourself, you are in the driver's seat. If it's forced on you, you are a victim of the transition. So once you are in the driver's seat, you find even the messy middle will be fun because you are driving through the messy middle. And I must say, maybe I have been very lucky. Even the transitions that were forced on me, I was quickly able to turn into, well, let me make the best of it. And I was back in the driver's seat and I said, now I'll decide where I want to go. And again, I was controlling my transition. I think this is also, that could also be quite important. Are you a victim of the transition or are you sitting in the driver's seat and it's a transition that you initiated and that you enjoy and you're happy to reach the end wherever this might be?
Herbert, that's brilliant. Thank you for bringing up that difference. We refer to that as the external kick or the intrinsic shift. Where did it happen to you, or is it a choice that you made? But I think there is a difference. We believe there is a difference between change, which is something that happens to us. You get fired, that's a change. You've had no hand in it. But you have a choice if you're going to make that into a transition, right? And it sounds like you've been very strong at identifying, getting into the driver's seat, and then making that into an elegant transition. And I think some of that is wisdom, right? We've metabolized our experience. We've learned how to accelerate into the next. Thank you for sharing that. I think my time with you is almost up.
Yeah, we are. We have about 4 minutes left. Does anybody have another question to take that last few minutes? Michelle, go ahead. I don't see another hand.
What's the one question you wish we would have asked you?
Good question. Gosh, nothing really pops to mind, which makes me feel unimaginative and boring, honestly. What is the one?
Don't let the inner critic get you, Christine.
But it's such a brilliant question. I think I would turn that around actually and bring it back to Herbert. And I would ask Herbert what his number one advice is for getting into the driver's seat in a transition.
Yeah, I think the first thing is you need to be an optimist. You need to trust your into your, let's say, into what you can do, and you always have the drive to make the best out of his situation and see the chance rather than the the opposite of the chance, the dangers or something like this. But this is a personality thing. You know, you can either be devastated and say, oh, what's happening to me? Or you say, okay, it's happening to me, but is there a way out? How can I sneak out of this and get creative? But you need to be able to trust yourself and say, hey, I'll find a way out of it. And some people have difficulty in doing this. They might ask for help for people, which is fine. I was able to do this myself most of the time, and maybe my challenges were not so big that I couldn't help myself. But I think you just need to have a positive approach to life to turn everything or almost everything into a positive challenge, rather than seeing no chance. Now, sorry, excuse me for my bad spontaneous English at this moment.
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I put you on the spot and I appreciate it.
Yeah, I bet none of us could do German like that.
Before we wrap, I just want to give a few acknowledgements. One is this ebook that you'll be receiving was written by my co-founder and colleagues, Jeff Hamwee and Carrie Cardinale. Carrie runs all of our online programming. Jeff is our head of content. They are both brilliant. I can't believe that I get to work with them. Our mindset work, I always want to shout out to Carol Dweck. She wrote the book Mindset, really has been a transformational or foundational part of all of our work. is her work around mindset. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is kind of the grandfather of flow, and you'll see these shout outs in the ebook as well, but it's important for me to acknowledge whose shoulders I am standing on here, because just have such brilliant coworkers, and we have certainly leaned on incredible thought leaders. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Christine.
You, Christine.
Oh,
Thank
and
you,
Chip
Christine.
Conley. I forgot Chip. Chip is my
Course.
co-founder and was the original impetus behind the entire idea, which I thought was crazy when we started 6 years ago. And he has the most sensitive zeitgeist antenna I've ever met. And he was absolutely right that though the time is ripe for tools and schools for midlife transitions. And with thanks so
Thank you,
much.
Christine. Just
Bye-bye.
just to further the thank you and the bit of a plug, you haven't mentioned, of course, that you're opening a new center in New Mexico. When will that happen?
We are officially opening our New Mexico Ranch campus, which is called Rising Circle Ranch. It's 25 minutes south of the plaza in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And our first public workshop, which is sold out, begins on April 28th with Michael Franti leading, I think it's Midlife Rhythm with Michael Franti, who is a wonderful rock star who's done tons of work around his own midlife. And we have weekly workshops going on both in Santa Fe and in Baja California, so Mexico. You can find us at meawisdom.com with all the information. Thanks, Peter.
Well, I think it's
It's a very lovely website, by the way.
Thank you.
And thank you, Christine. It's you were one of the most compelling speakers at our live event back in June, and a lot of people talking about that. And that's clearly not an accident. You have this way of communicating, sharing wisdom, your very first statement, in a way that is incredibly genuine and open and honest. And I believe you folks, when you talk to Christine in person, she's just like this. This is not a Zoom face. And I think that she, in many ways, embodies what MEA is doing and what we're trying to communicate with to all of us and between all of us as we get older, because it is about the collective wisdom we can provide. So on that note, I really want to thank you for taking the time again for us. It's very helpful, and I think everyone here. Did everyone have an moment with Christine today?
Yes.
Most definitely.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we all did, and I think every time you talk to her, you still get an aha moment. I think that's a sign of somebody who's truly, thinking beyond just the expected. Because, in fact, I'd be disappointed if I didn't get an aha moment from her. But something I also think it wouldn't happen. So let's all spend the rest of our day looking for moral beauty in our own selves and in others, and appreciate your time, Christine. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful to spend morning with you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Christine. So we have, we'll transition our mode here just a little bit as we take a minute to absorb what we've just shared with Christine. We do have a breakout plan for everyone to take a moment to reflect on this. So in a moment, Sarah's going to put us back into breakout groups. I think what we really kind of sit in after this conversation with her, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to chat about what phase are you in right now? We did a question at the beginning and some journaling on all the transitions we might be going through. And I think it might be interesting to talk a little bit about what phase you are within those transitions. And when you think about that step pattern that she talked about of competence and challenge, what step are you taking right now? And as you're doing that, maybe drawing on a little bit of Herbert's inspiration here, are you in the driver's seat on that step? Or do you feel that you're kind of stuck and you're kind of stagnant? Or are you kind of getting pushed through that step? And maybe take a minute to think about how you can get into that driver's seat to achieve that step that you are taking in that phase. So there's a few questions there. Obviously, these are very much so meant for you. So if there's something else you want to talk about, please engage with your breakout and choose as you go. But I think chatting a little bit about what phase are you in? Are you in that beginning, which is around endings, or are you in the messy middle, or are you at the new beginnings phase? And then what step are you trying to take, and are you in the driver's seat? Okay, so with that, we'll do a breakout. Sarah, you should have a little nudge pop up to send you there, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.
Yep, I'll send everyone there soon. I'll also just mention we will be sending out the ebook, so look for that in your email, as well as the survey link, just to get your feedback on the session. So just putting that out there right now, and you should see a breakout room pop up.
Perfect, amazing. So everyone, we're just going to take a few minutes. We'd love to hear how your breakouts went, and if there are any conversations that really struck home that you'd like to share just before we wrap up for the day. So how did we go thinking about where we are at each phase?
Well,
Anyone want to share?
Well, if Deb's not going to pipe in, I'm going to pipe in because she said something really compelling. And she says, I mean, we want to label these phases, but we're in, depending on the aspect of your life you're talking about, you can be in the messy middle in one bit, and in the whatever the other two were, but you can be all over the map. So it's not like this continuum.
It's true.
You're all over, and
True.
of course that's absolutely correct. And so to stress yourself out over, my God, I'm not in the messy middle on this and I am in that, would seem to be counterproductive. So anyway, that was just a really interesting observation.
Very true. Yeah, I like that one. Was there anything that came out about getting into the driver's seat? No. I have to say, I'm going through a number of transitions myself. Go ahead.
I just shared with the group that, getting out of the messy group, and just for everybody's knowledge, I lost my wife 17 months ago. And so that's the process I'm going through. But I found that going through that process, that messy bit was, it wasn't easy, but it was filled with questions and answers, but that needed answers. But it was being on my own. So I, as much as what I valued the support that I got from friends and family, I found most valuable was the time when I was on my own, when I could reflect and painfully reflect sometimes on what was and what was going to be. And it was only, and going through that messy bit, I was able to start to deal with some of the questions like, so what if this had happened? If this didn't happen, would she have died? If we did this, would she have lived? And so all of those questions was coming up, and it was haunting me. But on my own, I could start to slowly work through that without any distraction until I got to the point where I realized any of those questions, no matter what the answers to them were, they were not going to help me moving forward. And so I ended up eventually with just gratitude that I was married to an amazing woman for 46 years. And that was a breakthrough in itself. And then moving on out of the messy bit, starting to look at, so how do I honor her memory? And the best way I believe I can honor her memory is to get on with my life and be the best version of myself that I can be. Thank you.
Oh, that's powerful. That's powerful. That concept of you can only have one driver in a car, and sometimes you do have to be alone to drive yourself. Somehow piecing that to Aika. Oh, I can feel that one. That resonates with me. Yes. Is there anything else someone would like to share just before we wrap up?
I want to put Lindsay and Herbert both on the spot. There was some great stuff around driver's seat, and I saw Lindsay's hand up.
I did put it up, and I just think, we had the good fortune to be in with Herbert, who shared just how important it is to go out and acknowledge that connecting with nature and having space just to accept and recognize you're in a space and look for opportunities. Also, the idea, the resilience tool of, is it helping me or is it hurting me? At a certain point to say, is it time for me to look for some shelter from this rain that is raining on me? To not just accept that you have to be in this space, but to look around. Is there a tree I can pop under? And to get some agency. So we had a lovely talk about, different phases all at the same time, and just accepting, but hooking into your senses and other things to feel change. So that was great.
Amazing.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Any other last comments for everyone? My goodness, what a good day. Okay, maybe I'll hand it over to Sarah to do a bit of a closing here. From me, myself, many thanks to all of you for your comments today. It's been a really, really lovely keynote and discussion this morning.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Julia. And I'd just like to echo thanks to everyone for attending today, for making time. Appreciate it's been busy for everyone and we have a lot of events on, so really appreciate everyone coming. I do want to say that tomorrow we are hosting a happy hour. It'll be a bit earlier in the day because it is Good Friday. So, you can start your day with us if you're in Eastern time. It starts at 10 a.m. EDT. Also on Monday, we will be adding a session about affinity groups. So we'll have 2 or 3 of our affinity group leaders come together and just present on what they're hoping to get out of the affinity groups, how you can get involved. Really encourage you to come to that. We will post more information about that shortly, and you will also get an email about the events coming up next week. So please look for that. We also have a keynote next Thursday with Herminia Ibarra. That is a recording from her December 2023 presentation to the What's Next community. So we should have some great discussions that come out of that, and looking forward to having you all there. Also, just a few platform updates for everyone, some things that people had been asking about, so that's good. You can now see the members of the affinity groups that you are in, so that's kind of a nice addition. You can go in and find that in the sidebar. You can also see who is following you now on the platform, so that is good. We do continue to make some updates and adjustments to the platform, so keep checking back, and really encourage you to fill out your priorities, fill out your journals. The journal for this week will come out tomorrow, so please look for the email for there. And I think that is about it. And please look for the feedback form for this event as well. Again, thank you so much for your time today. I'm looking forward to seeing you all soon. Leave it there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank
Have a lovely
you.
day, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah. Bye-bye.